There's a difference between a faulty gun and a controversial one, the Sig P320. Depending on who you ask, it might be both. On August 1, 2025, a judge in Washington state upheld a ban on the Sig Sauer P320 at all state-run police academies. The decision follows a lawsuit filed by Sig Sauer in June challenging that ban after the pistol was removed from training programs earlier this year. Now, if you've been following the headlines, this isn't the first time the P320's made news. But this ruling marks something different. It's not just another lawsuit or online debate, it's an official stance from the state level about the safety of a service weapon still in use by departments nationwide. Let's back up and walk through how we got here. In late 2023, a police recruit in Washington reportedly suffered a gunshot wound at a training facility. According to investigators, the round was discharged from a holstered Sig P320 without the trigger being touched. That incident triggered an internal review by the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission (WSCJTC). By February 2025, the commission announced a full ban on the P320 at all of its training sites. Any recruit entering the academy would no longer be allowed to use that firearm, even if their department had issued it for duty use. For many in law enforcement and the firearms world, this decision raised serious concerns. The P320 isn't some fringe design. It won the U.S. military's modular handgun system contract in 2017. It's used by hundreds of police agencies. Millions of them have been sold to civilians and professionals alike. And it's earned a reputation as a modern, modular, accurate service pistol. But it's also attracted a fair share of controversy. Reports of unintended discharges, some caught on video, have surfaced over the years. Lawsuits followed. Some were dismissed. Others were quietly settled. Sig Sauer has consistently denied any design flaw, attributing issues to user error, third-party mods, or mishandling. So, when the WSCJTC issued their ban, Sig Sauer responded with a lawsuit. In June 2025, they sued the commission and its director, Monica Alexander, calling the ban unjustified and unprecedented. They argued it would hurt law enforcement, readiness, confuse recruits, and damage Sig's reputation. They requested a temporary injunction to suspend the ban until the case was resolved. But on August 1st, Judge Carol Murphy of Thurston County denied that request. She ruled that Sig hadn't shown the kind of irreparable harm needed to justify overriding a public safety measure. In short, the commission had enough reason to act and the ban stays in place for now. That brings us to a deeper question: why is one of the most widely issued pistols in the country now being treated like a liability? And that brings us to the real tension in all of this, not just whether a ban was upheld, but what actually justifies such a ban in the first place. Because when you strip away the courtroom language and the agency memos, what you're left with is a simple but loaded question: can this pistol go off without anyone touching the trigger? It's a claim that's been around for years, and for some in the firearms community, it's always felt more like internet rumor than mechanical reality. But now, it's showing up in sworn depositions, in injury reports, in quiet departmental memos, even in a military investigation. We've seen videos, heard testimony, and watched lawsuits stack up officers saying their holstered P320 discharged with no physical contact on the trigger. The stories vary, the settings change, but the core allegation stays the same. And that's exactly what led the Washington State Commission to say enough. Sig Sauer, to their credit, hasn't backed down. They've defended the platform aggressively, citing its compliance with all relevant safety standards, including those from the U.S. military. They point to millions of uneventful carry hours voluntary upgrades offered in 2017 and their own internal testing. But the broader picture isn't so easy to dismiss. The number of lawsuits involving P320 accidental discharges is unusually high for a modern handgun. Over 100 civil suits have been filed nationwide. The U.S. Air Force, after a fatal shooting involving a P320-based M18, paused its fielding of the weapon in late 2023. Some departments across the country have quietly phased it out. Others have doubled down, defending the platform based on years of flawless performance. And that's what makes this whole situation so hard to pin down. Because for every department with a horror story, there's another one that's issued P320s for 5 years without a single issue. For every officer injured in a non-trigger discharge, there are thousands who've drawn holstered and carried this gun daily without incident. So, is this a gun problem, a training problem, a perception problem? You talk to firearms instructors, armorers, range officers, people who've handled thousands of weapons, and opinions are mixed. Some say there's clearly something inconsistent in the fire control unit's tolerance stack. Others believe it's user error 90% of the time, with lawyers doing the rest. But here's what we do know: perception drives policy. And when enough people start to worry, when insurance providers start asking questions, when command staff gets nervous, when a news headline says officer shot by own gun, even a theoretical risk starts to feel like a real one. Let's bring it back to Washington for a moment. Departments there are in a tough spot. The P320 was adopted by many agencies because of its modularity, affordability, and military pedigree. Now, with the academy no longer allowing it, new recruits are training on alternate pistols only to graduate and be handed a weapon they've never used under stress. And switching platforms isn't cheap. Anacortes Police Department, for example, estimated that replacing P320s with a new handgun system would cost them at least $35,000 just to keep pace with the training requirements. That includes not just the new guns, but holsters, retention systems, armorer training qualification time, and the sheer admin load of a full equipment transition. Multiply that across the state, and you're talking real money. So we're left with this contradiction: a gun approved by federal agencies, used safely by thousands, is banned only during training. And the people hurt. Most small-town police departments, already stretched thin, now forced to make hard choices with tight budgets. From a purely functional standpoint, that's a hell of a policy gap. But from a legal standpoint, the Commission's defense is clear. We're not banning it for officers on duty. We're banning it where we have liability and where we're responsible for safety. That's the key. It's not really about whether the gun is defective. It's about who's willing to take responsibility if something goes wrong. It's a tough spot for departments, but it's also telling, because what we're seeing isn't just a firearm under scrutiny. It's liability management in real time. The decision to ban the P320 from training centers isn't necessarily a condemnation of the gun itself. It's a calculated move to manage institutional risk, especially in a culture where lawsuits are fast, expensive, and public opinion turns on a dime. And that brings us to the court's stance. Judge Murphy didn't declare the P320 dangerous. She didn't weigh in on trigger mechanics or metallurgy or striker wear over time. What she did say implicitly is that the Commission has the right to act when it believes there's a credible threat to safety, even if that threat hasn't yet been proven beyond doubt. That's not a mechanical judgment. That's a legal one. And that distinction matters, because when courts start leaning toward precaution instead of proof, that sets the tone for how future firearm disputes might be handled. It suggests that perception, if widespread enough, can override specification sheets and performance data. That public trust in a platform might become just as important as how it shoots. In some ways, that's an echo of what we've seen in the past. Remember the early Glock 17 recalls, or the NYPD trigger weight controversies, or when the Remington 700 was dragged through the mud for alleged firing pin issues until it eventually led to a massive settlement and a reputation hit. The lesson from all of that: once the seed of doubt is planted, it doesn't matter how statistically rare the malfunction is. The moment someone decides it might happen to them, that's when policies change. Now let's not pretend this is over. The lawsuit from Sig Sauer is still active. They could continue to pursue the case through a full trial or potentially appeal. And they have every incentive to fight, because if this ban stands, it could inspire other states, other agencies, and other lawsuits. The P320 isn't just a product at this point. It's a symbol caught in the crosshairs of legal precedent, institutional trust, and evolving expectations for safety. And that brings us really to the bigger picture. If you've carried the P320 on duty, on your belt appendix, OWB, you name it, you know what it is: a capable, accurate, modular sidearm that fits a lot of roles. But now it's also a case study, a test of how the modern firearm industry handles criticism, risk, and public scrutiny. It's a reminder that in today's world, mechanical performance isn't the only metric that matters. What's happening in Washington may not affect your EDC tomorrow. It may never reach your department or your state. But it should make you think about how our community handles problems, about how quickly a weapons narrative can change, and about whether we're prepared for a future where legal optics carry as much weight as muzzle velocity. The P320 was never just a sidearm. Now it's a headline, a legal battleground. And whether you stand with Sig Sauer or side with caution, there's one thing we should all agree on. If we're going to have this conversation about safety, about trust, about liability, it better be an honest one. So, what do you think? Is this ban a smart precaution, a political overreaction, or a sign of where firearm policy is headed next? Let me know in the comments. And if this is the kind of breakdown you appreciate, fact-based, experience-driven, and free of the drama, consider subscribing. We'll be following this story closely as it unfolds in court. Until then, stay sharp, stay safe, and carry what you trust.